To Abuja studios. Honorable Monguno, what's your take on the launch of the Financial Transparency and Open Treasury Portal?
Yes, my take on the launching of the financial transparency policy is that this is a clear manifestation of the fact that the present administration is not only preaching the gospel of fighting corruption, but is giving muscular expression to that fight by instituting open governance, whereby the management of the resources of the country is being monitored real time by Nigerians, and this will go a long way in further deepening the anti-corruption fight of the present government, and is also in tandem with the Freedom of Information Act, whereby people can access the conduct of public officials that were given the trust to manage public resources. But as I said earlier on, during the launch of the program, there is a need for us to translate these very beautiful programs that is aimed at stamping out corruption in Nigeria into laws by way of the executive arm of government initiating an executive bill before the National Assembly to insulate it from policy somersault of successive administration, because we are not praying for that. An administration may come that may decide to jettison all these policies to dustbin of history. But once these things are translated into law, it will stand the test of time, and it will be very difficult for an executive arm of government to just wake up one day and then consign it to dustbin of history through an executive fiat. That is my only suggestion. But it's a very good policy. It's aimed at finally stamping out corruption and bringing public transactions with regard to public resources to domain or to the public domain for monitoring real time.
All right, and of course you are talking about sustainability, and the National Assembly has a role to play here. You know, if it has to be become an act, it will be as part of the laws, you know, guiding the operations in the country. Thank you. Now let's turn to Emmanuel Anyibunam, Director, African Center for Parliamentary and Constitutional Studies. Now, what's your take on this very policy question?
Well, interestingly, anyway, as Prof has said, it is a global model on good governance. The issue is we must consider international budget partnership, who also have this, that budget is the macroeconomic blueprint of a country, that it has to have the hallmark of good governance, accountability, transparency, contestation, and then participation. Because if you look at our constitution, it says we the people. Now the ownership of participatory content in budgeting is what has been brought to bear. The world drive then started actually in Brazil. When participatory budget come up in Porto Alegre, the people said, no, you can no longer take us out of this project, because we the people, the welfare of the people is what this has come. Therefore, 10% of the capital component must now come from the people. You have good need assessment. Then beneficiary analysis, we are talking about constituency project and the rest of them. If you go there, you will see, apart from what IPC have complained, it has been ineffectual drilling of boreholes, tricycle, the other components, which are out of what? The basic beneficiary analysis and content of the people. So what the world drive now is on openness and answerability of the government to the people, true open system that makes the people the owners of their government and their own project, because the National Assembly makes law for the peace, order, and good governance of the people. So the hallmark of this, and it is also important to stress that in 2006, when we were existing from Paris Club, we agreed on 3 policy instruments: Fiscal Responsibility Act, Public Procurement Act, and Freedom of Information. This was what they gave us. We waited for 4 years to do what? Enact Freedom of Information. After that, up to this hour, we have no Fiscal Responsibility Council or public procurement, because all we are saying is openness in bidding and contestation. This is a project. The companies come through and bid, and we have what? Transparency. And this is where the civil society has to come in. Yes, government has inaugurated this. Like I said, freedom of information. Can you assess any of them? Have we looked at our public policy that there is internal audit? There's a external audit. The budget cycle. Who do you query? If the Ministry of Finance now has a portal, it is controlled by the ministry. It is a ministry issue, because even the Accountant General is under that. And that's what we are talking about, our what? Supreme Audit Act. We have said this all long ago. Let us have an independent audit. Then now the people can come and ask questions: why, how, and what? So this, until we come to this level, which is now a global trend, and which we welcome, but there must be what? Independence, and then the people now taking ownership by being what? Being a part of the budget process.
Okay, all right.
In public session and defense of budget, the people have to come in now. But Emmanuel, not come in, they can come in through the...
Emmanuel Ayegbuna,
yes.
Thanks a lot for your opening comments, and indeed the comments by the other guests. At this stage, it would appear we are still flying at 35,000 feet for most of our viewers. Can we bring it down to a level where our viewers can now have a better understanding of the practical issues involved in this financial transparency or open treasury portal, as has been said? What does it mean? I mean, so what value it has in it? Professor Menoma, for accounting purposes, what is it that we are talking about?
Yeah, we are talking about that when government is going to spend money, that, or after spending money, the amount daily that is given to who, for what purpose, is shown in a document that everybody can access. What that signifies is that it is not going to be in a language that is difficult. It's not going to be in a language that people cannot apprehend. It is a normal, easy to understand. It is not accounting jargon. It is that this is the amount that for this project, this is how much we have given to this person as of today. And by tomorrow, and if any amount is given to another person, it will also shown on the portal. And at the end of the quarter, the totality of those things that were done will also be summarized and be shown. That this, for the past 3 months, this is what we have done. After 6 months, it will be done. After 9 months, the summaries will also be done. After a whole year, the summaries will be done. So that anybody can easily access it that is literate, can read it and understand it. That is basically what the government is trying to do.
And the threshold for the amount to be disclosed is 5 million or so?
Yes, it's 5 million for ministries and 10 million for the Office of the Accountant General.
So is it, when we say for all transactions, what kind of transactions do we have in mind? I mean, supplies, big contracts, or consultancy, or what? I mean, what are the fields to be completed, if you have an idea of what we're talking about?
So long as it is an engagement that government is paying money, whether it is contract, whether it is supplies, whatever, so long as it has reached the threshold, that orders will be there for people to ask questions about. But any amount that is paid, that up to 10 million from Office of Accountant General, it will be shown in the portal. Any amount that is up to 5 million that is paid by ministries, it will be shown in the portal. But anything lower than that, because of the volume, there might be space, there may be too many. If you buy mosquito net for a hospital, for instance, that is only 100,000, it might not be there. But if you ask for it, it will be given.
Okay, let's go back to JALS, where we have Victor Moraco, the acting chairman of Fiscal Responsibility Commission. You've listened to analysis by Prof with respect to what should be expected in the portal, the information expected in the portal. Now, I want to ask you, what should be the what should characterize such information? Well, we know about a certain amount of money, a threshold, which is about 5 million by ministries, 10 million by other, perhaps, agencies. Now, the idea is this: should it just be the amount of money, or should there be other information with respect to what led to this amount of money in terms of explaining how this money is spent? Many Nigerians would like to understand why it is even necessary in the first place, to say that, look, if you are spending such amount of money, you should put it to a portal that will make it open, for everybody to have an idea of.
Very much. It is clear by this initiative, the federal government has shown its sincerity in its efforts to regain the confidence of the citizens. When you bring in citizens, when they get to know that they are part of what you're doing on daily basis, on monthly basis, every person, every contractor, every individual who is being paid will obviously know that his name will appear on the portal. Is no more secret. This opening up the space is a part of the effort to regain public trust. There are other efforts, bringing everything that is paid to the platforms, IPs, and all that. But this particular one is special in the sense that nobody, no arm of government will be exempted. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And the interesting thing is also that there will be a timeline for it. 14 days at the end of the month. It will be done on quarterly basis. The details and for what citizens ought to know, and government have shown a practical example by leading, by saying, look, you ought to know, you can access this information. It's not restricted. Part of the details will also explain what that money is being spent for, who received the money. By this direct approach to it, government have removed the veil. Government have removed the veil in anybody who receives money from any arm of the government. The idea is to ensure that even the citizen out there can just open his smartphone and know the amount spent by a particular MDA or a parastatal at any given time. Even if it's not up to 5 million, you can, as a citizen, in line with the Freedom of Information Act and in line with Section 51 of Fiscal Responsibility Act, you can also ask, and you obviously get the details of whatever expenditure the government. I think taking it from here, with this consolidation, it will obviously improve transparency, accountability, is a very strong weapon to fight corruption. And I think I want to urge our citizens to get interested. Ask questions, look at it. Don't rely on rumor or social media information. Go straight to the portal. If there are some information you feel that is not there, make your suggestions. The Office of Accountant General, which will be managing this specially designed website, will be available for further. There will be website managers that will also take on some of your issues. And this report will also come not just from the MDAs alone. The interesting thing You know, for some time now, there have been a lot of issues about constituency project. This is a whole of opportunity for citizens to also ask questions. So I think this is a right step in the right direction. It's part of government showing faith in open governance partnership. What I'll be saying, I think, because it's one economy, I want to urge all the tiers of government, particularly the state and local government, they should key into this system, because most, if not more than half, of our national resources are being spent at the other tiers. Consolidating all these reforms at the national level alone, yes, is a starting point, but there should be consistent efforts. Yes, we know about fiscal federalism, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, but being conscious that we run one economy. There's no economy for state and local government and a different economy for the national government, federal government. There is need, I want to urge the state governments and even the local government to key into this, because it's part of open government partnership. We can't go far from it because it's one economy, and so long as these efforts are being made, if the state government and the local government don't queue in, it will be a very big challenge. You can also recall very well the issues that led us to federal government being constrained to release bailout funds. Yes, today we're talking about the refunds of the repayment for those bailout funds. It has become an issue because obviously some of them were not properly used for the purposes. If citizens have always had this opportunity at those tiers of government to ask questions, these funds coming, these bailout funds that are being released by federal government, what are they being spent for? And if they can ask and get answers, I think some of the events of the past years may not have taken place.
All right, let's go over now to our Kano Network Center, where earlier we had Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, who is the former Commissioner for Planning and Budget. Now, Abdullahi, again, for the benefit of our viewers, some persons are likely to ask the question. Now, you have this open portal, as it is said, for transactions, for disclosure of transactions. Earlier, we had the TSA, which is the Treasury Single Account, that was supposed to give government itself an overview of inflows and outflows of all MDAs. I think maybe a couple of agencies we didn't get to hook on to the TSA. But what is the relationship between this new portal, as it were, and the TSA? And what difference does it make, and how do they reinforce each other?
Well, thank you very much. I think what we're seeing gradually is a build-up of delivering on the major promise of the government regarding anti-corruption and transparency. As you mentioned, the government fully implemented TSA starting in 2015, where most government accounts were consolidated into one major account. Now that did a huge dent to corruption, because what TSA simply means is just closing up the multiple thousands, sometimes, government accounts and bringing all your resources into one so that you can see a global view of what the state or the country has. For us in Kaduna, when we did TSA, we found accounts where individuals who had left government had been signing checks long after they had left office. So TSA consolidated for us over 470 accounts, and we discovered about 30 billion naira, which had hitherto not been known. For the federal government, I can only imagine it was much, much more. Now, this step that the federal government has taken with this portal, and as you mentioned, we seem to be flying at 35,000 feet. This portal, I just went on it this morning on my way here, and it is phenomenal. Phenomenal in the sense that I was able to access payments that have been made from government by government from 2018 all the way up to November 2019. And I could see the name of each company that had been paid. I could see what they had been paid for and for why. Now that brings a significant amount of transparency in the government, because we are able now as citizens, both ordinary and working in government, to be able to ask further questions. For example, there's a company that has been awarded a contract here that I see to supply tricycles in Anambra State. Now there are a number of things that then come up. How much are these tricycles bought for? How much have they been awarded for? What is the spread? You know, and why is it so far away from the normal market price? These are questions that every citizen can now ask. And if the people of Anambra go on this portal, and by next week or next month or next year, these tricycles are not there, then you have the impetus to ask questions. So we have departed from a Nigeria where payments are made for services that are not rendered and not delivered. This is online real time, and it is open to everybody. I was also impressed when I went on the portal this morning. There was a small tab that said, do you want to chat with an agent? So it means that not only do you have the information on the website, but you can also talk to the Office of the Accountant General in case you need any further guidance or any further questions. It is something that the government has supplied. Now the citizens need to respond with a demand for more and more information so that we can improve the country. Now, there's a third leg to this. Just last week, the NATI opened this beneficial ownership register, which means that every single person that owns oil blocks or oil assets in Nigeria has now been named. So it is important that as we have these tripod of reforms that are going on in our finances, that citizens are then able to put together this information. If you go on the website today, this Open Treasury portal, you can see budget performance reports on a daily basis. So we already know by first quarter, are we spending more on capital or on recurrent? We know by second quarter, are we spending more on the people of Nigeria or on the government that is running Nigeria? And this changes the conversation significantly. So this is allowing us really, it is something that we need to take up as Nigerians. And as my brother from the Fiscal Responsibility Commission has said, you know, states and local government are the next platform, because we do indeed control about 48% of the resources of the country. So it is something that we also need to move down to that level so that the country can benefit from this holistic level of transparency. And we can leave this era where we're living in significant amount of secrecy to one where citizens have all the information. It just depends on how you choose to use it and how you choose to access it.
That's interesting from you. If time allows us, we'll also get back to you to, of course, tell us how the sub-national governments will key into this, because you have mentioned part of it, but when we return to you, we'll be able to know how the sub-national governments will key into this and make it workable. All right, back to Abuja and to Emmanuel Anibunam once more. Now, how can this cement government's commitment to improve governance and, of course, supplement the whistleblowing policy and equip Nigerians with the tool to report financial wrongdoings?
It's a very interesting, like you see, the encouraging issue now is this, and which I must commend Anna for coming in now. A professional posture has been added to it. If I can, a Nigerian Bar Association can come in now, because you don't expect a man on the road to analyze budget. If they come in now at this critical area, because we are talking of threshold of 5 million and 10 million, we have not talked about billions and the rest. But if they queue in now, we will not be able, the contestation of participation will come in now. Then civil society, just like budgets, will all come into beer. Because we are talking of funds that have been already expended. We have not talked about what? Coming to present the policy and contestation. You talked about tricycle in Anambra State. How many companies bidded? How was the transparency? And how did you award this to this company? These are the questions, because now we are talking about what? People's sovereignty. We the people. This is what we need. Do we need tricycle now? And if it is it, Why wouldn't we have the best? And why will we give it to this company? So when all this is aggregated, now we will have now professional input. And questions will come in on what? Internal audit and external audit. We are talking about NAITI and the oil sector. So when we aggregate this, you will now know that it is no longer what? Business as usual. That the people have opened their eyes, that democracy has come, that it is now power to the people who now own these projects. And we open up not only from local government to the federal level, and then who awards and who questions and who reviews. With that, we'll be on course.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Anyegbuna. I mean, there's no question about it that from the explanations that our guests have provided here, this portal is a valuable advocacy tool for those who can access it and then utilize the information. But arising from what Anyegbuna has said, I would like to ask Professor Manama before we bring in Honorable Monguno. The two clear sayings here that we would need to advert our minds to. One, what is apparent may not be real. And two, they say half education can be dangerous, or information that is distorted could be dangerous. The fact that there is a post on the portal indicating what has been paid out, where does that leave the role of the auditor, internal and external? Because some persons would argue that until the auditor gives his or her imprimatur on a particular transaction, then probably there's no finality. So I visit the portal and I run away with information and I'm saying, look, wow, as you know, typical, and yet perhaps there's an audit query to which there's no response, or an audit query, the response is already in the pipeline, and so on and so forth. Where does this leave the role of auditing before uploading the information?
Basically, the auditor is expected to agree whether the terms and conditions of what is there is done. And as you know, for the internal auditor, it can do a pre-audit. That is to say, agreeing even before the purchase is done or before the contract is executed. But for the external auditor, most often it is after the whole thing is done, after a whole year. And it is a verifying process. That is to say that whether or not the deed is done according to conditions. So you find out that the role of the auditor is still there. The fact that you are given 10 million naira, the fact that you are given 1 billion naira, and you are expected to do ABCD, the role of the auditor will be to confirm whether it is done in the manner it is expected to be done. In fact, it is now that the role of the auditor has become more germane, because people are already aware that this money has been extended. So before you can hide it, that because people are not aware whether this thing has been given, whether the money has been, or the contract has been given but the money has not been given. But now we are aware that the money has been extended to the people that are supposed to do the work. So the role of the auditor has become, you have to also engage and say whether this thing has been done in the best of tradition. So you find out that the work has become more tasky for the auditor. In fact, for even the people in the Accountant General's office, because it is not just to do the work, it is also to expose it. So you find out that the auditor's work has even become more, because he has to now convince the people that have this information that this thing has been done in the best of tradition.
Okay, back to Honorable Mohammed Tahir Monguno. In your last comment, you mentioned sustainability of the policy to make it difficult for incoming administrations to jettison it. And I also recall I talked about the role of the National Assembly to make this policy a law, that will be binding, irrespective of which party is in power and at whatever time that it is. Now, what would you consider to be the commensurate sanctions for violators? Because in this kind of policy, that usually we're going to have violators here and there. And what should be, the kind of sanctions that you may suggest, assuming that aspect comes up?
Well, As I rightly suggested earlier on, there is a need to translate this beautiful policy into laws so that it will not be jettisoned to the dustbin of history by successive governments through an executive fiat. And because of the fact that corruption has eaten so deep, like a cancer worm into our blood, there is a need for us to take drastic measures for infraction on laws that are aimed at fighting corruption. Because one of the issues that has constituted a cog in the wheel of our developmental objectives is the issue of corruption. So no sanction that can be imposed for infraction on any aspect of the fight against corruption should be seen to be stiffer. The only suggestion that I will make as a punishment for infraction into such laws, if it eventually sees the light of the day, is a term of imprisonment without an option of fine, depending on the discretion of the judge and then the magnitude of the offense that was committed. There should be no an option of a fine, straight imprisonment for a sentence to a term of imprisonment. That is what I would suggest if it eventually comes to the National Assembly for possible legislation into law. But I want to tell you that even if the executive has not initiated an executive bill to bring this beautiful policy to translate into law, I will, in conjunction with some like minds in the National Assembly, initiate a private member's bill to make sure that this policy eventually sees the light of the day as a law.
Honorable Monguno, I still want to stay with you and take a look at this issue again from the cross-cutting nature that it represents. We talked about it being potentially an effective advocacy tool. Ayebunam and Professor Menoma have also talked about the challenge or the new increased responsibility for the auditor. The Accountant General is basically, in this narrative, a cashier. You know, it disburses, it receives, and then disburses. But the confirmation of shall I say, an appropriateness of disbursement will be with the Auditor General. Now, the Auditor General presents the reports to the National Assembly. What is it that the National Assembly finds in all of these, would find in all of these linkages? Because some persons would argue that indeed it is the Auditor General's report that provides much more effectively that final tool that you can say, fine, no, they didn't spend this money judiciously. Oh, that was money well spent. Not that you just disburse money and then the thing is out there every day, you are seeing the numbers. What does this mean in terms of, reconceptualizing what is required to do with the Auditor General's report, which we hear sometimes usually in arrears?
Yes, I think apart from the argument that you canvass now, this portal, against the backdrop of the controversy, particularly constituency projects have generated in the country today, it is an avenue for our constituents to monitor real time whether such monies has been disbursed, if it has been disbursed, for what purpose, and if those projects had been executed apart from the work that ICPC is doing. It also avails opportunity for our constituents to monitor whether these projects have been delivered to their doorsteps or not. Then with regard to the second issue that you raised of reports of the Auditor General submitted to the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly, of the two houses of the National Assembly, for subsequent deliberation and action by the National Assembly as a whole, what is to be done is, once the report of the Auditor General is presented to the Public Accounts Committee, It is now submitted to the National Assembly for adoption. And what I'm going to suggest is that the Auditor General should always submit its report as and when due, and for the National Assembly to also deliberate and adopt those reports as and when due, so that appropriate sanctions should be meted out to people that are in violation of the law.
Okay. Well, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We're having a very fruitful conversation this morning on financial transparency as an element of good governance. We're going to take a short break now. When we get back, we'll continue the conversation with our guests in Jos and Kano. Stay with us.
I'm Deputy Comptroller of Customs, Joseph Atta, the spokesman for the Joint Security Exercise. Over a period of time, either through indifference or deliberate non-compliance to the ECOWAS protocol on transit of goods by our neighbors, the Nigeria Customs Service have been raising this issue. MOUs were signed severally. They were broken as soon as they were signed. We've seized over 32,050 kg bags of rice, and that is a huge impact. And then the fact that the coming in of this foreign rice have been completely shut down. We've gone around, we've received testimonies of farmers who, before now, found it difficult to sell one truck on a market day. These people say it now that those who could not sell one can now sell up to 20 trucks.
Chief, good morning, sir. You are here already?
No, now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jam questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I am sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We have a number of tweets that have come in. My colleague and I will go through the tweets and then we'll return to our guests. Amagbola Hombabs. The new policy recently launched by the federal government on the Open Transparency Portal is a welcome development. It's no doubt another move to check corruption in our various MDAs. The truth remains that large-scale corruption Nigeria faces is perpetrated, according to him, by civil servants.
All right, now Festus Akimbawa, he says financial transparency and open government policy of the federal government should be supported by all Nigerians as it has the potential of preventing corruption. For the policy to be effective, it must be applied to our budgeting, lawmaking, policy making, contracting, and service delivery.
Akeju Olagbajo, we need to improve financial management in the public sector and have the mindset that the resources belong to every Nigerian. Transparency must follow accountability. We must take active interest to ensure that transparency is respected.
Law Alpha C, with the level of financial transparency and accountability exhibited by this administration under the leadership of President Buhari, Nigeria can now be said to be the giant of Africa and even beyond.
Daily Jack Solomon has this tweet. Now, it's especially important for Nigerians to come to terms with the understanding of their roles as citizens and the need to actively participate in governance. This will ultimately ensure sustainability in reform initiatives that will affect service delivery, even in the absence of CSOs.
Francis Obi, it is a welcome development and will help Nigeria to monitor the actual expenditures of government. For instance, monies paid to states can be monitored to know the actual federal government projects done by the state. Also, there must be penalties for diversion of funds, praying this policy will be sustained permanently.
Chris Simeon, the financial transparency and open governance policy will help tackle public sector corruption and create an avenue for MDAs to make daily financial inflows public. Kudos to the federal government for launching the scheme.
Multana Farouk, financial transparency and open governance are strong instruments of gaining trust and confidence of the public. Anyone who is reposed with the trust must learn how to imbibe the attribute of accounting ethics, which include accountability, transparency, honesty, etc.
Now, Ibrahim Modu Ajay tweets, says, how can the federal government ensure that the MDAs comply with the policy? Nigerians need to own that portal and demand for accountability.
Mike Anyako, Nigerians have the right to know about financials of government at all levels. These include all accruals and expenditures. It makes room for transparency and good governance, as well as curbing corruption. Now, the recent federal government's open governance policy is a welcome development, and we hope other states and local governments will follow suit.
Now, Farahami Idris has this tweet. Financial transparency is a very good concept, and its judicious execution should benefit all Nigerians. The ICPC and EFCC jobs will be complemented as the public will become the whistleblower, monitoring and evaluation officer.
Inusa, state government should join the Financial Transparency and Open Governance Initiative by the Buhari government. The salaries, allowances, and others of public office holders should also be made transparent too. It will help to curb corruption. That's about it all for the tweets we received this morning. But the Crown petition continues. Kingsley, I'd like to go to Jos.
Yeah,
yes.
I wanted to ask because Victor Morocco, the acting chairman of Fiscal Responsibility Act, has spoken of the need for this policy to be cascaded to the subnational entities. But I just wanted to find out from you, from your oversight, as it were, of fiscal responsibility countrywide, how much have we seen of a buy-in from the subnational entities of the Treasury single account?
Very well, thank you. Treasury single account TSA, which is one of those reforms which the federal government have been able to implement fully to ensure that all funds, all inflows of government are channeled through one source, which you will see it. You can open a portal and you'll see it. And some state governments obviously are making efforts. At least you can talk of states like Kaduna State, of recent Imo State, Oyo State, and I think Lagos State is also trying. But the issue is obvious that there should be some serious pressure from federal government, because you look at the fiscal federalism is a constitutional challenge. It's an impediment to cascading these policies, or maybe using the right word, pressing the state governments to accept them. They do it on their own and on their own time, which is not helping accountability. It is obvious that if you run a check, you find out that there are serious efforts, reforms that is going on at the federal level, but that of the states is only states that are willing. I can tell you that in TSA, that the states that have already bought into it are already benefiting from it. Some of these donor agencies that expect high transparency and accountability in their standards will obviously prefer some states, like Anambra State, Kaduna State. They will obviously want to do business with them more than some of the states. Previously, there was that challenge. But with this open portal of transparency, if the states should key into it, I think it will obviously help most of them, because a good number of them require the need to access some of these donor funds. The irony is that some of the standards set by these donor partners are very high, that most of them are finding it difficult. TSA, for instance, is one of them. And you find out that even the IPs, which presently the ASU and federal government is having issues over, I will begin to ask, what is the problem? What is the challenge there? Why won't anybody want to have the details of what goes on in his establishment to be known? We have moved away. We are moving away. We should move away from Egypt. Every state government, every institution, every MDA should open up for the citizens to know all they do. Refusing to do otherwise means a contravention of the Freedom of Information Act. It also means that there is something that you don't want your citizens to know. So I think this is the right time, even for federal government, to create a situation whereby there will be carrot and stick for state governments or their other tiers of government that are yet to queue into both the TSA and even the Open Portal Transparency Initiative. Because if you don't have it, if incentives are given to all the states, irrespective of their level of compliance, there won't be that competition. The federal government should, in the coming days, in the coming months, create a situation whereby all efforts to encourage states, issues like funds that are to be released on special sources, should be based on the fact that you must open your system to be checked. Because the earlier we begin to do that, the more we begin to hold the government accountable, particularly the government at those subnational. The interesting thing is that the federal government has set up the standard and they are still moving on with it, but there is need for that buy-in. I think it is obvious that something must be done because the Constitution will be an impediment for the federal government to impose. And the federal government, which cannot even do it, even if they want to. They can only do it with carrot and stick. For instance, if you create a state, if a state queues into the regime of TSA, the regime of transparency portal, there will be an incentive. You can access so opportunities. Taking it back, for instance, I recall that the 22 conditions to accept the bailout funds, then the federal government set out those conditions. But the actual thing is, what happened with those 22 fiscal sustainability plan that will ensure that for every state that wants to access the bailout fund, that they fully complied? If you do a check, if you do a monitoring of those conditions, you will find out that in actual fact, most of the states did not even comply up to 1/3 of the conditions. So I'm making a case that in the coming days, in the coming months, that every state that wants any assistance from the federal government, be it even a condition that some of them that want to borrow, that the federal government should insist on their compliance with all these reforms, which will enable them to be able to access such funds. I think with that, we can take it from there. And one peculiar thing is also that the citizens of this state should rise up. They are stakeholders. Citizens should stop being aloof. It's not an issue of party A, party A or party B. Citizens should take up their fate in their hand. In any case, if we continue to move a situation whereby stakeholders sit back and give, for instance, a governor who has a tenure of 4 years, they say, okay, is it not after 4 years he will go? No, that should not be the attitude. The attitude is that we are all stakeholders. You should ask.
Well, thank you, Victor Morako. You've made a valid points there, especially when you talk about these states, compliance about these states. And we have said it here a number of times in other topics on this platform, that when it comes to the issue of issues that have a concurrent status, that the states usually do their own bidding, not minding that whatever policy being floated by the federal government should be cascaded down to the grassroots so that Nigerians will have a feel of such a policy? You said it's a constitutional challenge that could be addressed by, of course, holding back some special funds meant for states who are not adhering to a national policy. Thank you once again. Now, let's remain up north there. Let's go to Kano, where we have a guest who has been a commissioner of planning and budgeting of a state. Of course, your state has been mentioned several times by Morocco based on compliance and all of that. That's a plus for you. How is it possible for other states to key into this policy, to make it a workable policy that Nigerians are going to benefit from? Very briefly, please.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've seen a rising level of compliance from states. The federal government has been working very closely with a number of state governments and a lot of reform issues. If you look at the fiscal sustainability points, for example, the 22 points that were mentioned as a condition for the bailout in 2016-17, those got states to do a lot. Now, the federal government, together with the states and the World Bank, have also signed up to a program called the State Fiscal Transparency, Accountability and Sustainability Initiative. Now, this program incentivizes states to provide more transparency and accountability to its citizens. So, for example, having your budgets online, having audited accounts, having a clear financial process, getting your payroll on an electronic database, all those attract different points that have resources attached to them. So I think the state governments are already working very closely with the federal government, and here we must really commend the current Minister of Finance, Hajia Zainab, who, even while she was at the Budget Ministry, did a lot to bring around that cohesion and working together. It is important to note that the federation, in our revenues as a government totally, are shared in a way that the federal government takes 52.6% of the resources that are made nationwide. So it's important because this open portal has now created transparency on 52% of the funds in this country. That is huge, and we must recognize that. The state governments take about 26% of the revenues in addition to their IGR. So it is very important that we take that battle on transparency down to the subnational level. And then the local governments, 774 of them, take about 20%. So it is very important that once the federal government locks this up, and we are watching very closely, we're still in the early days of implementation. This thing just started about a month or two ago. So we are watching very closely. And when I see the portal now, there are very, very many advantages, but there are a few things as well that need to be looked at. For example, if you look at some of the MDAs that are reporting, they report with very, very vague headlines. For example, it says capital project for 2018. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. We need a lot more detail. And so these are things that we would register and note as state governments, and then try as much as possible to move towards implementation. And of course, if an incentive program can be developed by the federal government to get states to key into this, then it will be highly welcome. But it is something that we must commend the federal government, the Minister of Finance, the Accountant General. This is something that is worthy, and I think it is a turning point in the era of fiscal transparency in Nigeria. But it is not a silver bullet. There's no silver bullet to fighting corruption. It is a totality of things that we must do as both government and private sector and the people, and we look forward to continuing to do that as the years go by.
Right. Thank you very much, Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, there for your perspective. Let's come back to Abuja studio guest. Emmanuel Anyegbuna, I'd like to ask you this question, and perhaps Professor Menama may also contribute, so that we know exactly the ultimate utility of this new policy as an advocacy tool. During President Olusegun Obasanjo's administration, they began the policy of publishing receipts by all three tiers of government from FAC, which is the Federation Allocation Accounts Committee. So on a monthly basis, you have the tables, and they run into several pages, and these are usually taken out as advertisements in the papers. Federal government got this, states got this, local governments got the details of what they got. At first, it seemed exciting, but now it appears routine. So, what waned? And therefore, what might wane with this same policy that you can go online and see 5 million spent, 10 million, and then see 100 million spent. Every month now, you still see the Federal Ministry of Finance publishing receipts by the 3 tiers of government. But how does that aid our transparency and accountability advocacy?
In actual fact, you said it all. The basic issue here is this. We are talking of institutions and their ability to hold on to policies. So if we come by what we are saying, just like the states, where is the House of Assembly? National Assembly, where is the oversight role? Because the issue is in procurement. Where was the tenders board? Did we have what? Open transparency and competition before you came to this project. How did you win it before the funds came? So if we will be able to institutionalize these issues, the states have virtually, if you go to all over the country and see the pathetic state of audit institutions, you will weep. Because it was a deliberate route to dismiss the audit and abandon audit. Because we are doing what? We are corrupt, just to say it. So until we come to this policy, like I have said, this policy is under Ministry of Finance, because Akanjara is under Ministry of Finance. Until the people own it, this is citizens training we need now. Because they are supposed to be quarterly returns, even to the National Assembly and State Assemblies, by these NDAs. And then the audit in the end will be what? A public document by Public Accounts Committee. Now wherein even the institutions involved. And then when we come to that realization, through what? Massive education of the people who now own their country. The Republican attitude will now come up to it, to bear. So this is what we need. And that's why I welcome professional input into this, like Anna has done. If MBA comes in, engineering setting comes up now for us to be able to evaluate and then have contestation that will add value to money. If you are constructing this road, we take a look at Ghana and other areas and know what the construction cost is. And you give us what? A timeline. And it will be published. There will be what? Transparency in what? Procurement process. I say, who are the tenders board? Who awarded this contract? And then, how do you make the releases? Once we do that, administratively, we handle all this. And then the populace will now be aware. Education is key here. Because public financial management in the institutions, we don't even have auditors now. They are supposed to be training. That's why ANA will come in, ICANN will come in, other respective professional bodies will come in, and then we should now look at the next generation. What type of civic education are we giving them? Can they ask why, how, and what over what happens to them and their future? Because we must consider what? The level of loans we are into now again, after existing from Paris Club from 2006. What we are doing now, who approves this, and where are these loans going? Do we have a profile of them? So these are the collective challenge to us now. That's what we have to do.
All right, thank you. Let's bring in Professor Menoma here.
The actual thing is actually we need to appreciate the fact that it is not yet complete. Because to say that it is the federal government, I think it is easy, even without even at the level that there are laws. You find out that the federal government will have to do its own laws, the state government will have to do their laws. I think it is simple. Most of these states are actually governed by two parties. If the parties buy into this program and they make it a party program, you find out that for APC and PDP, for instance, if all of them adopt this as part of the programs of the party, you find out that all the states will just key into it. And at the end of the day, most of the local governments will key into it. And the resources at the level of states and the local government, in fact, is more than what is available at the federal government. Because if you are just talking about 52% in terms of other receipts, there is the VAT, there is the internally generated revenue, and most of this from the markets, from salaries, that is the payee, it goes to the state government. So you find out that in terms of quantum, the volume of resources in the hands of local government and states, even more than what is available at the federal level. So there is the need to make sure that however we are going to do it, to bring in the local governments and state governments. And at the end of it, as you said, sir, that you realize that not until we are able to define that what is it that should be available to the people and engage the professionals to give professional position on the matter. We are not going to get to where we are going, because just releasing information on what you want to release on the basis of how you want to do it is not going to give any check. Because even as we are talking about, if they decide to make it that for every transaction that is more than 5 million, we'll decide to divide it into 3 and be posting. We will not post 2 million that we're given today. We'll give 2 million today, 2 million tomorrow, 1 million. So we don't need to even show it at all. If we're going to pay you 5.5 million, instead of paying you 5.5 million at once, we give you 2 million today, we give you 2 million tomorrow, and we give you 1.2 the next day. So that one is not going to appear at all. If at the level of the federal, at the level of our Accountant General's office, we give you 3 million today, we give you 7 million tomorrow, it is not going to show at all in the portal that we're talking about. So there are a lot of ways to circumvent whatever policy that we're talking about. So you realize that what is important is what the check that can be there, and it is only the professionals that will be in a position to make this. And let there be platform where these professionals can be made to make inputs in these programs. Yeah, well, Prof, thanks a lot. But we also remember that it's an offense. I mean, for those who are assuming that you can circumvent, it's an offense to amortize, to atomize contracts, to split up contracts in order to circumvent the regulation that says, look, let the amount come in bulk. You say break it down into smaller bits so that you don't make the particular threshold. If you remember Olabode George's case at the NPA. Yeah, that's right. Okay. All right, Honorable Monguno, let's get your closing thoughts very briefly.
Well, the general consensus is that the state governments and the local governments find it very difficult to key into these policies and programs of the federal government that are aimed at fighting corruption. And the impediment that is identified is the Constitution. Well, the Constitution is meant for the people, and the Constitution is an organic document that is supposed to change with the changing realities, to take into consideration the objective and subjective realities of the time. If the Constitution is an amendment, is an impediment for the states to key in, then there is need for us to amend our Constitution to make sure that these laws are of general application to all the nooks and crannies of the country, irrespective of the states or the local governments, because the Constitution is meant for the people and is supposed to be an organic document that's supposed to change with changing realities of the time.
And that takes us back to the National Assembly, because it's a primary.
That is our primary responsibility. And right now we are kickstarting the process of constitutional amendment by January next year. So it's something that we have to consider.
When we're stretching it so far, we will lose the federal complexion. Let us bear that in mind.
Well, that's
we're already a federal state.
That's a topic for another day. I know that democracy is practiced all over the world, and your own democracy is the way you pattern it. Right. So let's appreciate all of you for being here this morning, and of course added value to the program. Professor Mohammed Menoma, President, Association of National Accountants of Nigeria, ANAN, and former Vice Chancellor of Nasarawa State University. It's been wonderful talking to you this morning.
Thank you very much. And, always a pleasure.
All right. And Mohammed Tahil, Honorable Mohammed Tahil Monguno, is also a regular here. Chief Whip, House of Representatives, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Victor Morako, the Acting Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, you reached us all the way from our Just Studio. Thank you for being part of our show this morning. Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, the former Commissioner, Planning and Budget, Kaduna State, and now the Chief of Staff to Governor Nasir El-Rufai of Kaduna. We thank you for your thoughts and, of course, your wealth of experience you brought to bear this morning. And last but not the least, we'd like to appreciate Emmanuel Anyebunam, Director, African Center for Parliamentary and Constitutional Studies. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, so that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. I would like to thank you for tuning in. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, You have a lovely day ahead. I'm Kingsley Osadole.
And I'm Kirin Umayo. Thank you for watching and have a great day.